Jimin exposed the promise Jungkook broke, his reaction shattered. "Army, why did you lie to me, Jungkook?" The words were a whisper, yet they cut through the backstage silence like a blade. It happened seconds after the cameras stopped rolling, when the lights were still flickering from the final take and the scent of smoke machines lingered in the air. Jimin stood at the center of the room, chest rising and falling, eyes trembling with something between fury and heartbreak. Jungkook froze by the monitor, shoulders rigid, sweat still clinging to his jawline from the last performance. He didn't turn immediately. He couldn't. Not after hearing that voice, quiet, wounded, and too steady to be anything but real. Jimin's footsteps approached him slowly, each tap of his boot echoing louder than the applause that had filled the set minutes before. Jungkook felt the vibration of every step in his spine. He forced himself to breathe, to swallow the sudden dryness in his throat, to prepare for whatever truth Jimin was about to drag out under the buzzing fluorescent lights. When Jungkook finally turned, he saw it, the small folded piece of paper in Jimin's hand. Old. Softened at the edges. Familiar. A part of his chest tightened violently, because he knew exactly what it was before Jimin even lifted it. "You kept this," Jimin said, his voice cracking just enough to betray how deeply he'd been holding everything inside. "All this time, you kept it but didn't keep the promise." Jungkook stared at the paper, the stupid, hopeful scrap they had written on years ago, when exhaustion had turned them sentimental and honesty had felt safe. A promise that Jungkook made recklessly, thinking he would never break it. "I didn't lie," Jungkook murmured, though even he could hear the wavering uncertainty underneath. Jimin laughed softly, a sound so sharp it didn't resemble a laugh at all. "You didn't? Then explain why I had to find out from someone else. Explain why you said one thing to me and did the opposite behind my back." The set around them felt too bright, too sterile. Cameraman packing equipment glanced discreetly before slipping away, recognizing the tension as something private, dangerous, and not meant for public consumption. Jungkook took a hesitant step closer, the floor cold beneath his boots. His lungs ached with the words he still didn't know how to say. "I never meant to hurt you. But you did." Jimin's fingers tightened around the paper. His breathing grew uneven, not angry now, worse. "Wounded. You made me believe you would stay. You made me believe you'd never walk away from what we built together. And then, just like that, you were gone." Jungkook shut his eyes, his pulse hammering in his throat. "You don't understand what it was like for me back then." "Then make me understand," Jimin snapped. "Because right now, all I see is a broken promise, and I don't know who you are anymore." Jungkook felt something inside him fracture at the words. The room seemed to tilt, the humming lights turning into a dull roar inside his ears. He looked at Jimin, really looked at him, and for the first time in months, he saw not the confident performer, not the teasing friend, not the dependable partner. He saw a man who had waited and waited and waited for an explanation that never came. Jimin's eyes glistened, but he wasn't crying. Not yet. He was too angry for tears. "You knew how much that promise meant to me," Jimin whispered, voice trembling as if every syllable was pulled from somewhere deep and buried. "You said you'd never leave me alone on stage. You said we'd face everything together. You looked me in the eye and said those words." "I remember," Jungkook whispered back. "Then why didn't you keep it?" The memories hit him like impact shock, late-night practices, whispered conversations on rooftops, the desperate hope in Jimin's voice when he confessed he feared losing people, losing purpose, losing the version of himself he only felt grounded in when Jungkook was beside him. He remembered the night he'd made that promise. He remembered meaning every word, but he also remembered the fear that drove him away later. The pressure. The doubt. The suffocating weight of expectations he couldn't untangle from his own panic. Jungkook opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His silence was its own confession. Jimin looked at him as if he were unraveling. Not loudly. Not dramatically. Quietly. In the way heartbreak often happens in real life, soft, inward, unseen unless you're the one who caused it. "So that's it," Jimin exhaled, voice barely there. "You broke the promise because it was easier than telling me the truth." "It wasn't easy," Jungkook insisted. "It was the hardest thing I ever did." Jimin shook his head. "No. The hardest thing would have been being honest with me." Something inside Jungkook snapped, guilt carving its way through his ribs. He stepped forward until he stood inches from Jimin, You think I wasn't scared, he whispered. You think I didn't hate myself every day I stayed silent. I didn't break that promise because I stopped caring. I broke it because I cared too much, and I didn't know how to be enough for you. Jimin's eyes widened, surprise flickering behind the hurt. Jungkook rarely admitted weakness. Rarely showed vulnerability unless pushed past his breaking point. Jimin's voice softened. You were already enough. You always were. I just wish you'd believed that. For a moment, the tension eased, replaced by something fragile and unbearably human. The distance between them was almost gone now, physically, emotionally, yet the unspoken pain still stretched like a thin, trembling thread ready to snap. Jimin unfolded the paper with slow, deliberate care. The promise scrawled in their old handwriting glowed faintly under the flickering lights. His fingers brushed Jungkook's as he handed it back. I'm not asking you to fix the past, Jimin said quietly. I just needed the truth. The truth trembled on Jungkook's lips, aching to be spoken. But speaking it meant exposing the part of himself he'd buried the deepest, the fear, the failure, the reason he vanished. He exhaled shakily and he finally told him. The air between them thickened the moment Jungkook opened his mouth, as if the room itself braced for the explosion his words might trigger. He could hear his own heartbeat pounding against his ribs, feel the tremor in his fingers, taste the metallic tang of fear at the back of his tongue. Jimin waited, still, tense, the paper trembling softly in his hand. You want the truth? Jungkook whispered, voice raw. Fine. I'll tell you. Jimin didn't blink. He stood rooted to the spot, as though any movement might shatter whatever fragile thread connected them. Jungkook ran a hand through his hair, pacing once to the side, then back again, unable to stand still under the weight of what he'd held back for so long. Every step echoed against the cold studio floor. He stopped in front of him and inhaled sharply. I didn't leave because the promise didn't matter, he said. I left because I thought you didn't need me anymore. Jimin's breath caught, his brows furrowing. What are you talking about? I saw how you were. Strong. Confident. Untouchable. Jungkook's voice wavered, threaded with years of swallowed insecurity. I kept telling myself I was just holding you back. You were never holding me back, Jimin snapped, anger and disbelief colliding. How could you even think that? Because I watched you grow without me, Jungkook said, louder now, words tumbling out in a rush he could no longer restrain. I watched you get better, faster, bolder. I watched you chase the stage like it was the only thing you ever needed. And I thought, maybe you didn't need me the same way anymore. Jimin shook his head, his expression tightening, disbelief giving way to something sharper. So instead of talking to me, you disappeared. You broke a promise because you were insecure? Jungkook flinched, the accusation piercing deeper than he expected. I wasn't just insecure. I was scared. Of what? Jimin demanded. Of me. Of what you meant to me. Yes. Jungkook blurted out. The word reverberated off the walls, louder than either of them intended. It stunned Jimin into silence. Jungkook's hands balled into fists. I was scared of how much you meant to me. I was scared it would ruin everything, that I would ruin everything. I was scared that if I relied on you too much, you'd look at me one day and see someone weak. Jimin stared at him, breath unsteady. Jungkook, why didn't you just say that? Because I thought it was pathetic, Jungkook said, voice sinking. Because I thought you'd look at me differently. Jimin stepped closer, so close that Jungkook could feel the warmth radiating from him, could see the way his pupils flickered with a storm of emotions, hurt, anger, confusion, yes, but also something unbearably tender. You idiot, Jimin whispered. I wanted you to rely on me. Jungkook felt the world tilt. The words hit with the force of a confession. I thought I'd lose you if I told you the truth, he murmured, and instead, Jimin said, voice cracking, you lost me because you didn't. Jungkook swallowed, throat burning. I didn't want to drag you into my mess. You weren't a mess, Jimin said, shaking his head slowly. You were just human. And I would have stayed. I would have understood. I would have helped you carry it. Jungkook blinked hard, eyes stinging, the haze of old guilt thickening in his chest. I know. Silence stretched, painful, heavy, filled with everything the years had pressed between them. Then, as if breaking under the pressure, Jimin spoke again, voice lower, almost trembling despite his effort to stay composed. Do you have any idea what it felt like, waiting for you to come back? Checking my phone at 2 in the morning, hoping you'd explain? Replaying your promise in my head and wondering what I did wrong? Jungkook's chest caved in. It wasn't you. But it felt like it was, Jimin whispered. It felt like you left because of me. Jungkook closed the distance, gently taking Jimin's wrist. His touch was warm, hesitant, desperate. I never wanted you to feel that. But I did. Jimin swallowed hard, the muscles in his jaw tightening. And when I found this paper again, I realized how much it still hurt. Jungkook looked down at the crumpled promise. His own handwriting stared back at him, a reminder of the boy he used to be, the fear he had wrapped around himself like armor. I'm sorry, Jungkook breathed. The words cracked open from somewhere deep, unprotected. I'm so sorry. Jimin searched his face as if trying to determine whether the apology was real, whether it was enough, whether it came too late. The room felt smaller now, the air warmer, the tension beginning to shift from confrontation to something more unstable, something dangerously close to raw honesty neither of them had ever dared to touch. Do you still mean it? Jimin finally asked. Mean what? Jungkook whispered. The promise. Jungkook stared at him, breath unsteady, soul trembling on the edge of truth. I never stopped meaning it, Jungkook said, voice barely above a breath. Not even when I broke it. Jimin's eyes softened, but tears pooled there, glistening, catching on eyelashes. His voice fell to a whisper. Then why didn't you come back sooner? Jungkook exhaled, his answer barely holding together. Because I didn't think I deserved to. The confession broke Jimin. Something inside him unraveled, quiet, fragile, devastating. The anger faded first, then the defensiveness, then the mask he had been wearing since the moment he walked into the room. What remained was just Jimin, hurt, hopeful, exhausted, and more vulnerable than he wanted to be. Slowly, he reached out and touched Jungkook's cheek, his thumb brushing lightly over skin still warm from the lights. Jungkook froze, breath catching, every muscle in his body shivering at the unexpected softness. You should have told me, Jimin whispered. I know. You should have trusted me. I know. Jimin's hand trembled. I would have stayed with you through everything. Jungkook's voice broke. I know. For a moment, everything stilled. It felt like a fragile, flickering truce, one misstep away from breaking again, but then Jimin exhaled, the sound shaking, filled with months, years of emotion he no longer had the strength to hold back. And Jungkook braced himself, knowing the hardest part still hadn't been spoken, the reason he left. The secret he never told Jimin. The part he'd buried so deeply that digging it up now would hurt them both. He finally opened his mouth, and he told him everything. Jungkook's voice faltered before the truth could leave his lips, as if the confession itself clawed at his throat from the inside. He looked at Jimin, really looked, and the weight of what he was about to admit pressed down on him like a crushing tide. Jimin's hand was still on his cheek, warm and trembling, anchoring him in a moment he was terrified to destroy. Jungkook stepped back first. It was small, instinctive, but enough to make Jimin freeze in place, stunned by the sudden distance. The air grew colder between them, the fluorescent lights humming like electric tension. Jungkook, Jimin said softly, don't run from this now. I'm not running, Jungkook replied, though his voice betrayed him with its unevenness. I'm trying to find the right words. Don't find them, Jimin murmured, stepping closer again. Just say them. Jungkook shut his eyes for a heartbeat, then forced them open. His gaze locked onto Jimin's, raw and terrified and full of something that looked like surrender. The reason I left, Jungkook began. The reason I broke the promise, it wasn't just fear. It wasn't pressure. It wasn't only insecurity. Jimin's brows drew together. Then what was it? Jungkook inhaled sharply. Someone threatened me. Jimin's entire expression shattered into shock. What? Who? Jungkook shook his head slowly, eyes dark, voice low and trembling. Someone who knew about us. Jimin's breath stopped. His fingers curled instinctively around the edge of Jungkook's sleeve. What do you mean knew about us? There wasn't an us. Jungkook swallowed. There could have been. And they saw it. The air thickened with unspoken realizations. Jimin's heartbeat pounded so hard he could feel it in his fingertips. Who? he demanded, voice tightening with fear and anger. Who threatened you? Jungkook looked down, jaw flexing. Someone from the upper team. Someone with power. Someone who told me that if I didn't create distance, if I didn't stop being too close to you, they would destroy everything we were building. Jimin stared at him, horror spreading slowly across his features. You're telling me someone forced you to break that promise? I'm telling you someone made me choose between my career and you, Jungkook said, his voice cracking. And at that time, I panicked. I didn't know how to protect both. Jimin felt a surge of heat rush through him, not anger at Jungkook this time, but fury at the invisible hand that had twisted their lives without their consent. Why didn't you tell me? Jimin whispered, voice thick with disbelief and devastation. I could have fought with you. I could have defended you. That's exactly why I didn't, Jungkook said, stepping closer. If I told you, you would have gone straight to them, consequences be damned. You would have sacrificed everything for me. And I couldn't let that happen. I wasn't going to be the reason you lost everything. Jimin's chest tightened painfully. I would have chosen you. And I didn't want you to, Jungkook breathed. His eyes shone, not with tears yet, but with guilt that had hollowed him out. I didn't want us to lose what we were both working for. Jimin's jaw clenched, his eyes burning. So you thought leaving me alone was better? I thought protecting you meant letting you hate me, Jungkook answered quietly. Jimin staggered a step back, wounded. Do you even realize how much that hurt? Yes, Jungkook whispered. Every single day. Jimin's hands were trembling now, not from anger, but from the emotional storm ravaging him from the inside. You let me think you abandoned me. You let me believe I wasn't important enough to stay for. I know. You let me break thinking I was the only one who cared. I know. You should have told me, Jimin said again, voice finally breaking. You should have given me the choice. Jungkook stepped closer until their foreheads nearly touched. His breath trembled as it brushed against Jimin's lips. If I gave you the choice, he whispered, you would have chosen me over everything else. And I couldn't let you burn your future for something that wasn't even real yet. Jimin's eyes widened. Not real. Jungkook didn't look away. Not defined. Not named. Not something I had the courage to ask for at the time. The confession hit Jimin like impact lightning, sudden, bright, impossible to ignore. You think I didn't want you to? Jimin asked, voice low, rough, dangerous with emotion. Jungkook froze. Jimin's eyes flashed, full of a pain he no longer tried to hide. You think I held on to that promise because I needed you as a teammate? As a friend? He laughed, but there was nothing amused about it. I held on to it because you were the one thing that made me feel safe when everything else was falling apart. The words struck Jungkook deeper than any accusation. Jimin looked down, breath shaking. And you let someone else decide for us. I know, Jungkook said, his voice breaking completely. I know, and I regret it every day. Silence spread like a tide, suffocating and heavy, until Jimin lifted his gaze again, eyes glistening. Tell me one thing, he whispered. Anything. Did you want me? Jimin asked. Not as a bandmate. Not as a friend. Did you want me the same way I wanted you? The question made Jungkook's throat tighten so violently he thought the words might tear him apart on their way out. He stepped forward and cupped Jimin's face, gentle, trembling, reverent. Every day, Jungkook whispered. I wanted you every day. Jimin inhaled sharply, and I still do, Jungkook added, voice barely a breath, as if the truth itself might ignite between them. The tension snapped like a struck chord. Jimin grabbed Jungkook's shirt and pulled him closer, breath hot, eyes burning with anger, longing, heartbreak, everything he had held inside for too long. You don't get to say that now, Jimin whispered fiercely. Not after years. Not after everything. But it's the truth. It's too late. No, Jungkook said, his fingers trembling against Jimin's skin. It's late, but not too late. Jimin froze, stunned by the certainty in his voice. Jungkook leaned in just enough that their breaths mingled, that the space between them shifted from anger to something sharper, deeper, dangerously alive. I'm done running, Jungkook whispered. From you, from us, from everything I didn't face. Jimin's chest rose sharply, his entire body trembling with 1,000 contradictions, and then, slowly, painfully, he stepped back. His voice came out soft, fragile, and devastating, then prove it. Jungkook didn't hesitate. Not this time. The moment Jimin whispered prove it, something in him snapped into clarity, a fire he had spent years suffocating suddenly roaring awake. He stepped forward, closing the distance Jimin had created, but Jimin lifted a hand between them, stopping him with nothing but the trembling in his fingers. Not like that, Jimin said, voice tight with restraint. I don't want empty words or emotions that explode just because we finally let this out. I want the truth. I want actions. I want something real. Jungkook swallowed hard. Then tell me what to do. You figure it out, Jimin whispered, stepping back again, but this time with intention, not fear. If you really mean everything you said, you'll know. The room felt colder instantly, though the heat between them still pulsed like an aftershock. Jimin started to turn away, slowly, almost unwillingly, when Jungkook reached out and caught his wrist. Don't leave, Jungkook said, voice cracking in a way he couldn't disguise. Jimin didn't look back. I'm not leaving. I just need space to breathe before I drown in all of this. He slipped his hand out of Jungkook's grip and walked toward the exit, the echoes of his footsteps slicing the air like sharp, rhythmic reminders of everything they had lost and everything still dangling unfinished between them. Jungkook stayed frozen where he stood long after the door shut behind Jimin. His breath shook. His hands were still warm from touching him. His mind raced with memories, with regret, with every unspoken word he should have said sooner. When the silence became unbearable, Jungkook finally moved. He ran out of the studio, down the dim hallway, past shocked staff who stared as he pushed through the side door into the cold night air. The city buzzed in distant waves, car horns, street vendors, muffled music from passing taxis, but Jungkook heard none of it. His pulse drowned out everything as he searched for Jimin in the dark. He found him leaning against the back wall of the building, head tipped back, eyes closed, chest rising and falling unevenly. Jimin didn't flinch when Jungkook approached. He didn't look up. But Jungkook saw the tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his mouth, the way he inhaled as if steadying himself against something overwhelming. Jungkook breathed no response. Jungkook took a careful step closer. Please look at me. Jimin's eyes opened slowly, glassy with emotion, but sharp enough to cut through Jungkook's defenses with brutal clarity. This is exactly why I walked out. You suffocate me and leave me starving at the same time. I don't mean to. Jungkook's voice cracked on every syllable. I'm trying to give you space but also not lose me again, Jimin finished, bitterness twisting the words. I know that's what you're afraid of. And you're not. Jungkook asked. Jimin laughed quietly, the sound exhausted and painful. I've been afraid for years, Jungkook. The confession hit Jungkook hard. Jimin pushed away from the wall, running a shaky hand through his hair. Do you know what it feels like to keep a feeling locked in your throat? To swallow it again and again until it feels like a stone growing heavier every time you breathe? Yes, Jungkook said, stepping closer. Jimin's eyes flickered to him with disbelief and hurt. If you did, you wouldn't have left me alone with it. Jungkook flinched. I didn't want my fear to become your burden. It already was, Jimin whispered. From the moment you disappeared. The night wrapped around them, cold, sharp, silent, but everything between them burned too hot, too bright. Jungkook reached out again, gently this time, touching Jimin's arm like he might break if he pressed too hard. What do you want from me? Jungkook asked, voice trembling with vulnerability he no longer tried to hide. Jimin looked at him with eyes that had cried too many times in places no one ever saw. I want you to stop deciding for me. Stop believing you know what's best for me. Stop walking away every time things get heavy. Stop protecting me by hurting me. Jungkook swallowed hard. I can do that. No, Jimin said, stepping closer until Jungkook could feel the warmth of his breath. You say you can. But I need you to show me. I will, Jungkook whispered. I'll do anything. Tell me how. Jimin's gaze moved slowly over Jungkook's face, searching, trembling, as if trying to decide whether he could trust the man standing in front of him or whether he should guard himself once more. Why now? Jimin asked softly. Why not years ago? Why didn't you choose me then? Jungkook's throat tightened because, he said softly, painfully, I thought the world wanted me to choose between us. And I wasn't brave enough to fight them. And now? Jimin challenged, voice low, fierce. Are you brave enough now? Jungkook stepped closer until their bodies nearly touched. Yes. Jimin stared at him, breath hitching at the intensity in Jungkook's eyes. Then prove it, he said again, but this time the words trembled, laced with hope he couldn't hide no matter how hard he tried. Jungkook took a breath, deep, steady, determined, and reached into his pocket. He pulled out the old folded promise Jimin had given back minutes earlier. The paper looked fragile, worn, barely holding itself together just like them. Jungkook unfolded it carefully, smoothing the creases with trembling fingers. I'm not asking you to forgive me now, he whispered. I'm asking you to let me try again. Not as the boy who made the promise, but as the man who understands what it meant. Jimin stared at the paper, at the handwriting that once felt like a sacred vow and later became a wound he couldn't close. Say it, Jimin murmured. Say what you couldn't say back then. Jungkook looked into his eyes and with a voice steady and full of conviction he had never allowed himself to embrace before, he spoke the truth that had lived inside him for far too long. I didn't just break a promise, Jungkook whispered. I broke your heart. And I swear on everything I will spend as long as it takes proving I'll never do it again. Jimin's breath shook for the first time. He didn't look away and Jungkook, finally, painfully, beautifully, didn't either. The rain had stopped hours ago, but the sound of it still lingered in Jungkook's ears as he stood alone backstage, staring at the dim glow of the emergency exit sign. Everything that had happened between them, every chase, every argument, every confession cracked open like a wound, felt as if it was leading to this one final moment. His chest tightened, breath shallow, eyes burning. He had run out of ways to pretend he wasn't hurting. Footsteps echoed behind him. Soft, hesitant, unmistakable. Jimin Jungkook, he called out, his voice trembling, as if he'd been holding back tears since the last time they spoke. Jungkook didn't turn around. You shouldn't be here. But I am. Jimin's voice cracked. I always end up here. With you. Jungkook shut his eyes. And every time you arrive, you leave me more broken. Jimin's breath hitched. Then let me fix what I broke. Finally, Jungkook looked at him. Jimin's eyes were glassy, cheeks flushed, lips trembling like he'd been rehearsing this moment and dreading it at the same time. He stepped closer, slow, careful, almost fragile. You didn't let me finish, Jimin whispered. All those times I tried to explain. All those times I chased after you. Explain what? Jungkook asked, exhausted. That you only wanted me when it was convenient. That you pushed me away whenever you got scared. No, Jimin said, his voice strong for the first time in days. That I loved you before you even realized you loved me back. And it terrified me. Jungkook froze. The words hit him with the force of a storm he didn't see coming. Jimin took another step, now standing inches away. I ran after you because losing you felt like losing oxygen. I kept messing up because loving you felt too big for me to hold without breaking something. Jungkook swallowed hard. And now? Now I'm not running anymore, Jimin whispered. I'm staying. Even if you don't want me. Even if this is the last conversation we ever have. Silence wrapped around them, tense and trembling. Jungkook felt something inside him unravel, every wall he'd built trembling like it wanted to collapse. You hurt me, he said quietly. I know, Jimin whispered. And I'll spend as long as you'll let me trying to heal what I damaged. Another silence. But this one felt different, softer, heavier, a space waiting to be filled. Jungkook exhaled shakily. And what if? I'm tired of hurting. Jimin's eyes widened. Then let me be the one who makes it stop. Jungkook stared into him, searching, trembling, hoping this time would be real. Jimin reached out, slowly, as if afraid Jungkook might vanish if he moved too fast. His hand hovered at Jungkook's cheek, waiting for permission. Jungkook didn't pull away, their foreheads pressed together, breaths mixing, the world shrinking to the space between them. This is the last chapter, Jungkook said softly, voice barely a breath. Then let it end right, Jimin murmured. Jungkook cupped his face, thumb brushing against the corner of Jimin's trembling mouth. And with the smallest, most fragile courage, Jungkook leaned in and kissed him, slow, searching, desperate with years of unsaid words. Jimin melted into him, hands gripping the back of Jungkook's hoodie as if he'd finally found the thing he'd been chasing for too long. When they parted, breathless and trembling, Jungkook whispered, "Don't run anymore, Jimin shook his head, tears slipping free. Not unless it's toward you. The stage lights flickered in the distance, shadows dancing around them like a curtain falling on the final scene. For the first time, neither of them stepped backward. They simply stood there, holding on, letting the storm inside them finally settle. And just like that, the story ended not with chaos, not with heartbreak, but with two hearts finding their way back after everything that tried to tear them apart.